Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It depends where in the globe and when you are watching this episode of the EAGE Local Chapter Kuwait seminars. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Colombo. He's an R&D coordinator at Geolog Technologies in Milan. Mr. Ivo is an environmental engineer who has been working in the energy industry for the past 7 years. He has received his PhD in environmental and infrastructure engineering at Politecnico di Milano. I hope I have spelled it correctly. And he's working with the R&D team at Geolog as a data scientist. Since 2021, he has been coordinating a multidisciplinary team focusing on research projects involving digital solutions, engineering, and geothermal activities. Mr. Ivo, welcome today. And we are very excited to hear this and to see this presentation from you. So please, the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you very much for this kind introduction, and good morning, good evening, or good afternoon to all of you. And thank you for being here to attend this webinar, where I have the pleasure to present the AI Petromech. That is a solution that we developed in Geolog and Geolog Technologies for the evaluation of geomechanical parameters while drilling. Today's agenda is organized into 4 main parts, where after a brief introduction, where we present some definition and some key parameters and their relevance and the conventional data acquisition system and the associated limitation, I'll dive deeper into the AI Petromech in terms of solution objective, methodology and deliverable, and we will see the result associated with 3 different case studies. After the conclusion, I will show you 3 main publications where we have presented topic and where you can find more details if you are interested in it. So let's start with a brief definition, section about definition. Geomechanics can be defined as the study of the mechanical state of the earth crust and of the processes occurring in it under the influence of natural physical factors as deposition, tectonics, uplift, pressure changes, stress relaxation, and thermal effects. Geomechanics applies to nearly all aspects of hydrocarbon extraction and geothermal exploitation, from exploration to production to abandonment, and across all scales. From the micro scale, for example, the interaction between the drill bit and the rock during the drilling activities, to the field and basis scale for modeling purposes. But what does it mean in terms of operation? Well, we need to take into account 3 main factors: the stresses, the strengths, and the activities. Stresses in the subsurface are not static through time, nor they are similar everywhere at any one time. Except in seismically active areas, stress and strength can be considered in an apparent state of equilibrium, an equilibrium that can be altered or even destroyed by all those activities generally associated with the oil and gas and geothermal industry, such as drilling, fracturing, depletion, hot or cold fluid injection. And the role of geomechanics is to predict when and how the state of equilibrium will be altered, which are the potential risks, and what is the possible impact that this alteration may have on drilling and production. On the left-hand side of the slides, you see some of the most relevant parameters that are usually employed for describing the elastic behavior of rocks. Their relevance strongly depends on the end user. So drillers are for sure interested in having a tool for monitoring the stability and the integrity of the borehole while drilling, or in predicting the optimal mud windows. For a reservoir engineer, instead, modeling fluid movement or predicting how fluid removal can affect the reservoir performance in the long run is, of course, of huge interest. For a completion engineer, instead, having a tool to design and monitoring the hydraulic fracturing simulation progress can be a huge support. If we move to the conventional data acquisition system, we can see how for some of these parameters depends on direct measurements, as for example, the compressional and the shear velocity, while others depends on a combination of indirect measurements and empirical relationship, like for example, the Buch modulus or the Young modulus. In the following, whenever I mention the conventional derived geomechanical parameter, I refer to this point. So the conventional way to get the geomechanical parameter is by combining downhole measurement with empirical relationships that are very often site-specific. As you can imagine, relying on downhole tool implies some limitation, especially in terms of cost and in terms of risks. From the economic point of view, logging is always expensive and may not be viable in challenging areas of instability and in long-reach high-angle section. From the technical point of view, they can introduce a high risk of sticking or lost in all issues. Beside the economic and technical aspect, we also need to take into account the legal aspect, as in some jurisdictions, there are substantial obstacles to deploying radioactive sources, and in most locations, there are serious legal issues if a radioactive source is lost in the hole. In order to overcome or partially reduce some of these limitations, we have developed a flexible and reliable approach which utilizes a machine learning model trained on available data from a limited number of wells in the same field or in the same basin, as we will see in the case history section, which allow us to derive with high accuracy the geomechanical parameters in any new well in the same field or the same basin using only drilling parameters and gamma ray. This approach, as I mentioned, is flexible as it can be run in very different geological contexts, as we did, for example, in carbonates, unconventional, and siliciclastic. The idea behind this service is to provide valuable information with limited additional cost and no additional risks. Let's spend a few words describing the methodology, which is a two-phase approach that can be summarized in building the model and running the model. The sketch in this slide represents the ideal scenario, where you have a field where several wells are already drilled, and you have the data associated with this well. If this is the case, and you want to get the geomechanical parameter in a new one, in this case the red one, the first step consists of collecting all the data that you can see on the left-hand side of the slides. So drilling parameters, sonic logs, density log, gamma ray, and the empirical relationship that allow to compute the Young modulus and the UCS by using the downhole tool. Here you can see also the X-ray fluorescence analysis as optional, and I will comment it in a few minutes. As output of this phase, we can get a machine learning-based geomechanical model. Once we have this model, we can apply it in a new well. So for this new well, the test well, we just need the drilling parameters, the gamma ray, and again, the XRF. Well, we defined the XRF as optional because in order to overcome all those limit situation, extreme situation, where the gamma ray, for whatever reason, is not available, or it fails in a specific part of the domain, we have created a parallel approach that allows us to compute a synthetic gamma ray by using the analysis, the XRF analysis on cuttings. If this is the case, we need the XRF also in the input data, in the input dataset, and of course in the input dataset of the second phase, which is the prediction phase. On the right-hand side, you can see the list of geomechanical parameters that can be computed with this approach, like the Young modulus, the unconfined compressive strength, the compressive and shear velocity, the density, the Poisson ratio, the shear modulus, and the bulk modulus. The first case history that we will see is the one that we did in collaboration with the Kuwait oil company applied in the carbonates. And for this case, we have 11 wells. And we decided to split the dataset in 10 offset wells that are used for the training and the validation phase, and 1 well to be used in a blind test mode. It is important to underline that in this case, the 10 wells belongs to different fields, but in a geological context that allow us to train a general model for all the basin. The results that we will see in the next few slides are a comparison between the geomechanical parameters obtained with the conventional approach and the same parameters obtained with our machine learning-based approach. Here in the slide, you have in the upper part the Young modulus and in the lower part the unconfined compressive strength. The Young modulus is defined as the ratio of the stress over the strain along the same axis in the range of the elastic behavior of the rock, while the unconfined compressive strength, the UCS, describes the maximum axial load that a sample can withstand without lateral loading. Here you can see the blue curves, which represent the Young modulus, in this case, in the upper part of the slides, obtained with the conventional approach. That means that where you don't have density logs and sonic logs, you cannot have any idea about the value of this parameter. Instead, with our approach, once we have trained the model, we can run it and get the value of the Young modulus in all the wells. If you focus on the right part of the slides, where we have both curves, you can see how the predicted Young modulus, the red curves, is able to match both the average value, the general trend, and also the high frequency variation. In this case, we have used as an error matrix the root mean square error, but ideally we can provide the clients with any error matrix that he wants to see in order to assess the model performance. These considerations that are true for the Young modulus and the UCS are still true also for the other 4 parameters that I will show you in the next 2 slides. So here we have the dynamic shear modulus in the upper part and the static shear modulus in the lower part. The shear modulus is defined as the ratio of the shear stress to the shear strain, and it is a measure of the elastic shear stiffness of a material. In the next slide, here, we have the dynamic Poisson ratio and the dynamic bulk modulus, where the Poisson ratio measures the deformation in the material in a direction perpendicular to the direction of the applied force, while the bulk modulus is the measure of how resistant a material is to compression. And again, you can see how the model prediction, the red curves, match the conventional results, the blue curves, in terms of average value, trend, and variation. The second case history is associated to an application in the unconventional. This is done in collaboration with Pan American Energy. And in this case, we have just 7 wells. And we decided to split the dataset into 6 offset wells for training and validation, and 1 for the test. Here we can see only the Young modulus as a result, because it is enough to present the weaknesses and the strengths of our approach. And I will start from the weaknesses. So we will see 3 zones of interest in this plot, and these zones are associated with 3 different data-related issues, each of them characterized by a different behavior of the prediction. The first one is inside formation 5, 6, and 7, where you can see that the blue curves and the red curves exhibit a divergent behavior. There is a huge discrepancy between the 2 results. And the reason is that for this application, the 6 offset well didn't encounter all of the 6 training well used for the training didn't encounter all the 3 formations. So the data set is so small that we were not able to properly train the model. The second zone of interest is in formation 1, where you can see that we are able to match the average value but not the trend and the variation. This is due to a similar reason, because again, this is a problem associated with the number of data available, but in this case, all the 6 wells encountered formation 1, but after the wrangling procedure, so after the assessment and the cleaning of the original dataset, the final dataset available for the training was much slower with respect to the dataset available for formation 2, 3, and 4, for example. Still a better condition with the previous case, but due to this limitation, we were only able to follow the average value of the parameter. The third area of interest is inside formation 3, where you can see that in the lower part of formation 3, there is again a discrepancy that looks like an offset between the blue curves and the red one. In this case, the ideal condition should have been to split formation 3 into 2 subformations due to the intrinsic complexity of the formation itself. We tried different workarounds, we tried different solutions, and after presenting all the results with the client's team, with Pan American teams, the clients decided that the results where only one formation is considered for formation 3 is the best for the application that they have in mind. This is just to emphasize that whatever we provide is discussed, presented with the maximum transparency as possible, because when we get something that is not clear, we dive deeper in order to understand which are the root cause of the failure in this case. But the last thing I would like to mention is that where the dataset is large enough to train the model, the agreement between the conventional Young modulus and the predicted one are very, very good. The third case history is a sort of crash test, because here we have just 3 wells, and we decided to use 2 of them for the training and validation and 1 for the application. I have to admit that when we did this test, we didn't expect to get anything at all, because the dataset is so small that we thought it was not reasonable to expect anything. When we ran the test, the result proved that we were wrong. And even though the result is worse with respect to what we have shown before, I would like to highlight that we are still able to reproduce the average value and sometimes even the trend in some of the formation, having only 2 offset wells, which is far below the minimum requirements that we have identified to run these services. The last thing that I would like to show you is the synthetic gamma ray that I mentioned in the methodology section. So in the exceptional cases where gamma ray from downhole tool is not available, we have developed an alternative approach that allows us to derive a synthetic gamma ray from the X-ray fluorescence analysis on cuttings. Here you can see, again, a comparison between the predicted curve, the red curve, and the conventional curve, the blue one, for the Young modulus, when the input of the model is the LWD gamma ray. So this is exactly the same results we have seen before. We decided at this point to run an what-if test. And the test consists essentially in what if we don't have the gamma ray, so we deploy our alternative approach, and we feed the algorithm with the synthetic gamma ray derived from XRF analysis. And the result is the one that we can see here in the lower part of the slide. If you look, let's say, from a visual comparison between the 2 graphs, you can see that there is some spikes. Okay, so these spikes were not present in the previous graph, but the general trend and the average value are there. The reason why we have these spikes are essentially due to the level of information of the input dataset. At the end of the day, we are comparing a LWD gamma ray with XRF analysis on cuttings. But even with this trade-off, I would say, we are still able to get a very acceptable, at least for the clients, what was a very acceptable results that can be a valid backup in case of presence of the gamma ray, and an alternative in case the gamma ray fails for whatever reason. These considerations are still true for the other two parameters, the UCS and the density that you can see here, where the spikes are still present, as you can see, but the model prediction match the conventional results in terms of average value, trend, and variation. We decided then to test the synthetic gamma ray that we have created, that we have developed in this way, with the synthetic gamma ray that can be obtained following the empirical relationship available in the literature. Here you have 5 scatter plots associated to 5 different wells. Let's focus on the well 1, where you have the comparison between log gamma ray and synthetic gamma ray. The red dots are the results of the comparison when the synthetic gamma ray is predicted via the machine learning approach. The black dots, instead, are the comparison, depict the comparison between log gamma ray and synthetic gamma ray, where synthetic gamma ray is computed by using the empirical relationship available in literature. We did this test for different wells just to assess its generability. And the reason, or at least the fact that the red dots are closer to the blue line with respect to the black dots explain why we are able to reproduce the average value, the trend, and the variation in the parameter that we have seen before. The fact that the points are not perfectly aligned along the blue line is one of the explanations of the spikes we have seen before. Just to conclude, we have developed a solution that is based on a 2-phase methodology, where the first phase consists of building the model, where we need to collect all the data that you can see on the left, so drilling parameters, sonic log, density log, gamma ray, XRF, and the empirical relationship that allow us to compute the geomechanical parameter by using the sonic, the density, the density in the training well, that can be found in literature or provided by the client itself. Once we have all this data, we analyze them, we clean them, we process them, and we use this final data set to train a model that allow us to move to the second phase, so the prediction phase, where the input of the model are the drilling parameters and the gamma ray, computed directly from the download tool or via our approach by using the XRF. The list of the geomechanical parameter that we can provide is in the gray box on the right. This approach allows us, once we have trained the model, to derive with high accuracy the geomechanical parameters in any new well, the same field or the same basin, using only the drilling parameters and the gamma ray. The gamma ray may be from the download log or from XRF in case of tool failure or unavailability. The sonic and the density logs are no more required in the new drilled wells. This tool provides a reliable and cost-effective backup to download tools when they are available, or represents a valid alternative when the use of download tool is not feasible for technical reason or financial viable for economic reason. Eventually, it can be also applied to legacy data in order to optimize future drilling campaign. In the last section, we have the 3 main publications that we did about this topic. And the first one, presented at NEOS, was a sort of proof of concept where we assessed the methodology and focused mainly on the Young modulus, while the second and the third are the description of the case history that we have seen this webinar. The second is the job we did with Pan American in Argentina, in the unconventional environment, while the last, the third one, is the job that we did in collaboration with KOC about the application of this methodology in carbonates. That's all on my side. I hope you have enjoyed this webinar, and I'm available if there is any questions. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ivo. It was a great presentation. So we will start with the question. The first one is from Fatma.
Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. My question is this method applicable for exploration wells, especially that sometimes they are sparse, they're not on the same location exactly?
Yes, this is, thank you for your question. This is one of the limits of the methodology because being structured and based on machine learning algorithm, it needs some offset well, some data to learn the behavior of the geomechanical parameters in the different formation. So generally, it cannot be applied in exploration wells unless the exploration wells is in a, let me say, in a geological context that is very similar to, I don't know, a geological context where other wells are available. In the presentation, I mentioned that for the carbonates case history, the wells belongs to 3 different fields. And in that case, we were able to create a general model. But I would say that as a general rule, this application has been thought as a field-specific application. So we need at least 4 to 6. This is a general rule of thumb to define the minimum number of wells that we need, offset wells. But again, this strongly depends on the context and the quality and the consistency of the data.
Thank you.
I have another question, which is, I think, related to Fatma's question. The question is, how many training wells do we need to train the data?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, we need at least, for example, we have seen that in the carbonates, having 10 wells allow us to create a general model to predict the behavior of the geomechanical parameters in any new well in the same basin. For other application, we have seen that even up to 6 wells sometimes are not enough for some specific formation, because at the end of the day, we need to keep in mind that this is a machine learning application. So in order to have a model proper trained, you need to feed it with enough data. So sometimes it could be better, just to give you an idea, it could be better to have maybe just 4 wells with a complete data set where the data are of good quality and good consistency, with respect to having maybe 15 wells where you have just hundreds of meters for each wells and the quality is not so great and the consistency is not good at all. So that's why it's not so easy to answer how many wells, but as a general rule, what we have seen based on our experience is that the minimum number can oscillate between 4 to 6 up to 10 for very complex environment.
This is perfect. So the third question is, after proved models by algorithm, is there a plan to enhance composite log A to add more measurement data such as generated geochemical parameters?
Okay, the idea behind this service was just to provide the geomechanical parameters. As you have seen, I never mentioned any interpretation, I never mentioned any further application because the clients we have collaborated with were interested in the data, in the raw data. So we focused on fine-tuning that part. Okay, no. But in principle, what we can be done is to combine this service with other services, or we can even think to expand the range of input data in order to provide something else. But for the sake of this service, we were focused only on drilling on geomechanical parameters.
The last question is, do you think that predicted geomechanical properties can be used for a frac job and wellbore stability? And
yes. Sorry. Yes. This is. Sorry to interrupt you. Yes, this is one of the applications that we think that this service can be used to. And of course, this is something that the drillers are more suitable to answer, but ideally, yes, because in the methodology, you can see that there are several input data. And I mentioned that we develop a flexible approach because the idea is also to meet the client's request as much as possible. So sometimes we have just part of the data set, maybe just the drilling parameters and a few logs, and we need to provide the results with a limited data set. So inside the coding, there are several, branches, depending on the input data, that allow us to deliver different kind of solution. And coming back directly to the question, one of the approach that we developed is a model that used only drilling parameters. In that case, we can provide an answer that is not as accurate as the one that I have shown in this webinar, where we combine drilling parameters and gamma ray, but at least is able to provide a real-time value, the average value, the trend and the variation, no, but the average value, yes, that can be useful for a quick estimation of the geomechanical parameters in real time while drilling.
This is very clear. Do we have another question? I think we are fine. Mr. Ivo, thank you so much for your effort. Really appreciate it and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.